28 years later is finally here. I got the earliest showing possible, and that's not something I often do, but if you know me from my 28 days later video, you know how passionate I am about these films. I won't be spoiling anything major here, but I'd advise you not to watch if you care about minor spoilers. But let's get to the meat of the conversation. Is 28 years later any good? Kind of. At times it's brilliant and unexpectedly emotional, but there were times when I was getting pissed off, like actually getting upset at the movie. But let's start off positive. The characters who matter to the main plot are interesting and engaging to watch, and you do somewhat care about their journeys. The story for this one is changed up enough from the previous two to give you a new experience, so you don't feel like you're watching something that you've already seen. And as sequels go, that's not an easy thing to pull off. For me, Ralph Fiennes was the standout actor. He gave some powerful yet somber dialogue relating to the philosophy of life and death. And you end up changing your perspective from seeing him as a nutjob who likes to build towers with bones to someone you admire and respect. Like the story, the infected have also evolved. Those of you who found the trailer confusing with these giant infected standing on the hill while the rest are making their charge, think of them as leaders of the infected. Leaders who have evolved to be much bigger and much stronger than the regulars. The movie doesn't delve into the idea very much when it comes to explaining how or why the infected have leaders, but it's a cool evolution idea, and maybe we'll learn more about them in the next one. Oh, by the way, the movie ends in a way where it's obvious that there will be more of these films coming. Let's hope Danny Boyle doesn't take another 20 years to make them. Okay, there's one infected scene that might be considered a bigger spoiler, so maybe skip to this timestamp. 3, 2, 1. We see a pregnant infected lady give birth, and it's just as strange as you might imagine, and a bit more. Because interestingly, we see it reaching out its hands to hold on to a non-infected person's hand for comfort to cope with the pain. Almost like the pain was so severe that it temporarily shut down the corrupted part of the brain. So yeah, that scene was equally as shocking as it was interesting. I love these moments that challenge what you believe to be facts about the infected and the world of this universe. Maybe not when it's done in a jarring way, like the audio editing mistake in 28 days. Now for the parts that had me a little ticked off. For me, the thing that sets 28 Days Later apart from the zombie genre is that it feels like it's really happening. I already covered this point in the 28 Days video, but in summary, one of its biggest factors for the immersion was the cinematography and editing. 28 Days Later was created with the purpose of hooking you into the world, almost believing yourself to be watching a low-budget documentary. The movie established a realistic tone for the universe, and while the sequel 28 Weeks does have its issues, for the most part it still kept that feeling. 28 Years on the other hand, you couldn't help but feel that the cinematography and editing was achieving the exact opposite. You were painfully aware of the filmmaking process, because every 2 minutes it switches to a new stylistic shot, which on a technical level looked amazing, but they just didn't gel together. But this was nowhere near as jarring for me as the bloody awful editing. For the first 30 minutes, the editing was driving me crazy. I don't wish to sound like Peter Griffin here, but the movie does insist upon itself. By splicing in that wartime poem that we heard in the trailer, along with footage from an old movie, to insist upon the tension of the scene. But there was nothing tense or unsettling actually happening in the scene. All they're doing is walking across a causeway and into a forest. The comparisons to war times of the past just didn't feel appropriate. Another part of the editing that frustrated me was every time they killed one of the infected, they added these extremely jarring cuts, using 2 different camera places, switching quickly between them. I felt like I was watching Crank. And if you don't see that as an issue, maybe think back to 28 Days, where even though quick cuts were used, they still felt immersive, rather than just someone showing off their editing skills. My next biggest gripe, and my final complaint for this review, the music. When you think of the 28 films, one of the first things that probably comes to mind is that opening sequence in 28 Weeks, with Robert Carlyle running from the infected. Outside of the amazing cinematography, what makes that sequence so iconic? The incredible music. Now I don't mind so much that they didn't include this iconic score for 28 Years Later, but the music they did use felt completely out of place. It just kind of feels tapped on, with not much thought behind it, and that really disappoints me, because the use of that wartime boots poem was so well done in the trailer, so I really had high hopes for the audio choices. I've got tons more to say about this film, but I need to have footage from the movie for me to review my notes and properly convey my points. So yeah, there's going to be another video on this, in the hopefully not too distant future. But anyway, overall, was 28 years later worth the wait? I would say yes, because now I feel invested in the future of where this film series is going. It appears that the infected are still evolving, and it will be cool to see what's next. Unfortunately, however, this film doesn't come anywhere close to the immersive experience of 28 Days, and so it's getting a 6 out of 10.